to the Modesto Junior College Speech and Debate team. I know we had some hiccups out front with tickets, but as folks are able to come on in and find a seat, we're going to go ahead and get this show going. So I just have a couple of quick announcements and then we'll get into the show. First off, I know that many folks come out here as part of their public speaking or group discussion classes or human communication or debate classes. Most teachers have separate assignments that they connect folks up to, so I kind of warn folks, always follow the advice that your instructor gave you, probably good advice in a whole wide variety of contexts. However, a lot of Palm City's faculty do ask their students to fill out one of these critique forms. So if you didn't get one, they do have a bunch of them on the tables in the front of the house, and feel free to sneak up there and grab one of those. As someone who's taught public speaking classes a lot in the past, I will warn folks there's a backside to this. So if you have been asked to fill one of these out, don't forget to do both sides. The other thing that I would ask is I know that a lot of us have these fun devices in our pockets. However, it's a matter of safety for our performers and respect that I would ask folks to go ahead and make sure that those are silenced so they're not going off during the show. But we'd also ask folks to go ahead and put those away out of the sign of respect of the folks that have been preparing to put this show together for you all. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have a fantastic show prepared for you all tonight. As I mentioned before, my name is Ryan Guy, and I'm the director of the Speech and Debate team. The Modesto Junior College Speech and Debate team has actually been in operation here at Modesto Junior College since the second year the college was open. So back in 1922, the first group of individuals came together, they formed a Speech and Debate Society, and they started going to tournaments. And over the last close to 100 years, the group of people that you see tonight have been continuing on that legacy. We've competed all through the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s and onward. And so tonight you're going to get a chance to kind of see the next generation of MJC Speech and Debate. One thing that I always like to mention to folks as they come to this speech night is the talented group of people that you're going to see up here on stage. Many of them started sitting in the same seats that you are right now, meaning the first time they ever got a look at speech and debate was coming to a speech night. So if at the end of this evening you find yourself saying like, oh, this is really exciting, this is something that I think I could see myself doing, I encourage you to come talk to any of the members of the team. We're always actively recruiting for the fall, and if you would like to kind of try this out and get into it, we'd be really stoked to have you. Well, at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to my co-director of forensics, Professor Tori Shemp, to get the show started and introduce you all to the team. Enjoy the show, everybody.
This afternoon, I have the distinct pleasure of introducing you to all of the members of the MJC Speech and Debate team. I will call them up one at a time, and at the end, we can recognize them with a big round of applause. We'll start with Vic Bailey, Alex Cyprian, Alexis Gerardo, Donya Gaith, Iman Gaith, Gavin Gould Tharp, Kevin Guzman, Matthew Kingdon, Jacob Piachko, Riley Nuno, Nicole Otero, Clarice Perez, Katrina Pyburn, Leonie Sablin, Grant Talent, Derek Tristeo, and Madison Wedge. Let's give these folks a big round of applause. Tonight, you'll get to hear from many of these fine speakers, but at this stage, I'm going to turn it over to our Masters of Ceremony, Alex Cyprian and Derek Tristeo.
Good evening and welcome everybody. Oh shit. All right. Welcome to Spring 2020 MJC Speech Night. Thank you.
The MJC Speech and Debate team recently returned from our first tournament of the semester.
Let's try this again. All right. They are students from 2-year colleges, 4-year universities, and multiple states tested their mettle as championship speakers.
Many of the students you will see on stage tonight competed in the very speeches that you're about to witness, and they also battled their way into final rounds, earning us a van full of trophies and awards.
So the first event tonight you will see is an informative speech. This type of speech introduces cutting-edge topics and seeks to help the audience understand them fully by using substantial explanations and factual information. The goal is not to sway the audience's opinion, but rather to share with them a wealth of knowledge regarding innovations and discoveries.
The informative speech you will hear from tonight is Aman Gaith. Aman is double majoring in international relations and economics, and this is her second semester on the team. A couple of fun facts about her are that she can read 5 books a day, and that she is also a brown belt in Muay Thai. So please join us in welcoming Aman.
Over the last year, the human costs of climate change have become painfully real. From historically large hurricanes, city-destroying wildfires, and the evacuation of our coastal communities in the wake of rising sea levels, the urgency to take action seems to increase with each passing day. We have long heard that a rise in our global temperature by just 2 degrees Celsius would have devastating consequences. This year, research shows that some places have already reached this tipping point. An August 2019 article from the Washington Post analyzed more than a century of national oceanic and atmospheric temperature data across the lower 48 states and has found that some places are nearing or have already crossed that 2-degree mark. This is compounded by the dire warning issued just last October by the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that failure to reduce emissions to near zero by the year 2030 would most certainly result in consequences that could devastate all life on Earth. It has become increasingly clear that we must not only reduce those emissions, but find some way to pay back that carbon debt that we have accumulated since the dawn of our Industrial Revolution. Thus, I'm here to discuss a promising new technology called direct air capture, or DAC. It has the potential to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So today, we'll be looking at DAC tech as described by the Rhodium Group in 2019 as essential. We'll be looking at what it is, how it works, and some of its major implications. So first, let's take a look at what it is. In early 2015, Carbon Engineering, a clean energy company based out in British Columbia, saw a new, innovative technology. Their system, direct air capture, was hoped to serve as a way to directly remove CO2 from our atmosphere. Over a 3-year pilot program, they were able to build, bring online, and construct a large-scale test on this design. BBC reports in 2019 that the results are in and they show highly promising success. The peer-reviewed journal Joule published an article of preliminary findings in June of 2018, where they explained that Carbon Engineering's first plant clearly demonstrated feasibility with a large-scale DAC system. The article also explains that previous attempts at similar DAC systems failed to produce the same adequate results. Specifically, previous attempts required a greater expenditure of carbon than was removed at the end. But what's unique about Carbon Engineering's process is that not only are they able to sequester carbon without those emissions, it's cost effective. David Roberts writes for Vox in 2018 that this is the clearest look at how DAC might actually work, not just as a technology, but as a business. In addition to being able to sequester CO2, the DAC model is also unique in that it is able to turn that captured carbon dioxide into a variety of other useful products. During its test run, the DAC model was all able to create synthetic gasoline, carbon-neutral products, and they even had enough CO2 left over to make some carbonated drinks. Refreshing, right? In the conclusion of this pilot run, Carbon Engineering was able to partner up with Greyrock, a California-based company, where they were able to scale up this technology for commercial use. Vox reports in September 2019 that preliminary construction has already begun in the United States and Canada to test its economic viability. The article argues that if successful, DAC tech can become a $1 trillion market by the year 2030. Now that we've seen how promising DAC is, let's take a look at how it works. The aspirations behind DAC are pretty grand, but the execution is actually pretty simple. Decarbonize the global economy by extracting CO2 straight from the air through the use of some giant fan and a chemical filter. Then use that extracted material to fuel the world's needs for energy and products. As explained by a white page article on January 2019 on Carbon Engineering's website, their system integrates two main processes. The first process absorbs CO2 through a device called an air contractor. This device pulls the air through an alkaline hydroxide solution that converts it into a stable liquid solution, making it easier to transport. The second process regenerates that stable liquid solution and then delivers pure CO2 as its end product. Astronaut Rafi writes reports in July of 2019 that the pure carbon solution is then transported to a container where it's brought into contact with calcium oxide to react with the CO2 to create calcium carbonate. It then goes through a third container where the calcium carbonate is then heated to 100 degrees Celsius to again create calcium oxide. And while the plant is in operation, these two processes work in tandem, continuously producing sequestered CO2 as its output and only requiring energy, water, and just a small amount of chemicals as its input. In the end of this, synthetic fuels can be made and make a bunch of other useful materials and products. Alternatively, it can be converted back to its raw elemental carbonated form, as you can see here, and it can be inserted underground for long-term removal, or to just revitalize our depleted gas and oil fields. Now that we've seen how DAC can transform both our environment and our economy, let's take a look at some of its major implications. The wide-scale implementation of DAC presents some amazing opportunities, but at the same time, some difficult choices. Let's take a look at those opportunities. A February 2019 article from the Journal of Mitigation and Adaptation Strategies for Global Change conducted an analysis on Carbon Engineering's plans to implement DAC commercially. Their findings show that the DAC model seemed to be the most feasible mitigation strategy to achieve the targets set out in the Paris Climate Accords. This means that pursuing this technology is a way for the United States to demonstrate its global commitment to the international community. A June 2018 article from the peer-reviewed Journal of Sustainable Energy and Fuels argues that DAC is the missing link needed to finally close that carbon cycle, as it would allow us to effectively reduce our atmospheric carbon levels while simultaneously producing fuels that can be used in vehicles without any need for modification from the end user. However, this also presents us with some difficult choices. At its core, DAC gives us the technology to reduce the amount of carbon in our atmosphere. And for the first time since our ancestors started cracking open the earth and releasing those fossil fuels into the air, this technology now exists to put these materials back where they belong, where they can be safely stored. The problem, though, lies in economic motivation. What convinces oil companies and investors alike is their ability to make new fuels and new oils without any need for costly extraction. It's important to note that the making of these materials are at least carbon neutral, but instead of reducing the amount of carbon, they just reuse it. And the plastic would still contribute to overflowing landfills, and the fuel would still overcrowd our roads with cars. But companies are still capitalizing on this. An August 2019 article from the Houston Chronicle explains that ExxonMobil and Chevron have just invested millions of dollars into this technology. On the one hand, the economic viability of DAC means that it can get a buy-in from some pretty powerful players. On the other hand, valuing economic stability over environmental sustainability is a difference between fixing a problem and just prolonging the onset of that same problem. That being said, the previously cited source from the Rhodium Group explains that the actual application of DAC matters really little in this early stage of development as long as they make their 2030 deployment goals. In other words, any progress is still progress, and DAC is our way forward. So today, we looked at how DAC can transform and shape our world for the better. We looked at what it is, how it works, and some of its complex implications to our society. Our generation is saddled with a carbon debt, a debt that has been accumulated by our parents and grandparents and those that came way before them. And it is still realistic to be hopeful about how we address climate change. And direct air capture gives us a choice. We can either pass on this debt back onto our children, Or we could use this technology to do something about it now.
The next event you will witness is high stakes impromptu speaking. In this speech, the presenter receives a set of random prompts and has only 2 minutes to prepare for a 5-minute speech.
Tonight, Grant Talent will test his wits and perform the impromptu speech. He is double majoring in statistics and sociology, and this is his second semester on the team. A fun fact about him is that he also played on MJC's soccer team. So please give it up for Grant.
Opening quotation now.
Thirty seconds used. One minute used. One minute and 30 seconds used.
So guess what, guys? Whether you fall way over here on the left side of the political spectrum, the extreme left side, or whether you're way over here on the extreme right side of the political spectrum, you guys have something in common. You're both wrong. The fact of the matter is, the extreme left, verging on communism, and the extreme right, where they uphold their supremacist values, they both share a common belief that people are dumb. On the extreme left, they think they need to be told exactly what they need to do. And on the extreme right, they think that people can't handle making decisions on their own. What this means is that they believe people are dumb. When I got the quote today, I can't change the direction of the wind, but I can adjust my sails to always reach my direction, by Jimmy Dean. I interpreted this quote to mean that humans have the ability to adapt to our situation. People aren't dumb. In order to prove this to you guys today, I'm going to first talk about a sociological experiment that the left wing would scoff at. Then I'm going to talk about a historical situation that proved the right wrong. And finally, I will show an example of a technological innovation that really showed the strength of humanity. So to start, we're going to talk about Javier and Maria. A sociological experiment took place where somebody had the idea of, hey, let's not pay the social workers so much money, let's give the money to the people in the experiment. Now, a lot of people on the extreme left would say, no, we need to tell these people what to do. They don't know how to do it themselves. But this was not true when the experiment came to be. Javier and Maria were part of a group, and to be included in this study, you had to come in with a group of 10 or more people as a community. That will be key. So, Javier and Maria were given money just as everybody else was in the experiment. And the thing was, the social workers were not allowed to help them. So Javier and Maria started to think, let's use my money to save up to put a mortgage down on a house. So in a lot of ways, the social worker would have advised them, guys, this is a bad idea. You're living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe it's not time to buy a house. But Javier and Maria had something in mind. They knew that they weren't dumb. They knew, just as Jimmy Dean says, that they would be able to change the direction. They can't change the direction of the wind, but they could adjust their sails. They could adapt. So they bought the house, and it was with a very high interest rate. So at first it makes it seem like the social worker was right. But what happened was, Javier and Maria weren't dumb. They had a plan. What they did with this was they got their neighborhood, they got the community together. The strength of their community, they reworked the house. They had a neighbor who was in landscaping and helped them out on a discount. They had somebody who was in roofing and could help them out with that. So what happened was they were able to refinance the house at a rate they could afford. If they had listened to the social worker, we wouldn't have seen this outcome. So now that we've talked about Javier and Maria and the way that they showed their ability to adjust the sails, we're now going to move on to talk about something that the right wing was proven wrong about. So after the Civil War, a common argument that the right wing had was that if you give slaves rights, they're not going to be able to survive on their own. We were actually doing them a favor because we were giving them housing and clothing. This is utterly disgusting and wrong. The fact of the matter is that once these freed slaves got their freedom, they constructed townships. They became bankers. They helped each other with loans. All of this was because of their intelligence, because of their ability to adapt. The right wing would say that they didn't have this ability, but they were proven dead wrong. And that is so important. That is so key. Humans' intelligence means that they were able to adapt to their situation. They were able to change the direction of their sails to harness what they needed to accomplish. The right was proven wrong by this, and the left was proven wrong before. So now we're going to talk about just how humans are able to innovate so effectively. And this is a concept known as diffusion of innovation. And we saw this very clearly with the implementation of Facebook. So you guys might not remember, when Facebook came out, it was only for universities and like staffing agencies. What we saw here is something called early adapters. So the key to human intelligence is the ability to pick up on a good idea because you see it working for somebody else. So the masses of people were able to see that Facebook was able to take the people were able to take Facebook and use it. The early adopters of these universities was key because they saw how well it was effective and how easily this was working. This is a mechanism that drives human innovation, the intelligence of ourselves and the intelligence of our ability to feed off of our communities. So today, we talked about a number of things. We talked about Javier and Maria's flight. We talked about the reconstruction and how these African Americans were able to construct these townships. So when I get the quote, I can't change the direction of the wind, but I can adjust my sails to always reach my destination by Jimmy Dean, I know that this is absolutely true. We have the ability to change the direction of our sails because we are intelligent. We can use our communities to create better results.
So our third event of the night is a prose piece. In this presentation, the speaker performs a piece of published literature. Performers seek to move audiences and to make a point by embodying the characters and inviting viewers to become immersed in the act of storytelling.
The performer you will see tonight is Donia Gaith. She is majoring in design and computer science, and this is her second semester on the team. Her fun fact, and I quote, "I've broken 4 limbs and 1 thumb before, none of which were mine." So, Layla, Iman, and Yomna, if you're out there, I'm so sorry. That being said, please join us in welcoming Donia.
Summer of 2013, in Cairo, Egypt, I was on an assignment for Al Jazeera, and I was covering a major political upheaval. The president at the time, a guy named Mohammed Morsi, had been deposed and jailed, and what his supporters said was an illegitimate military coup. So they, in protest, set up these sit-ins, 2 of them in the city. And by the middle of August, the government finally did what they've been threatening to do, which is to clear the sit-ins. But they did so with unabated violence. They started shooting at the people in the sit-ins and the surrounding neighborhoods around 7 in the morning. And they didn't stop until well into the night, until pretty much everybody was either dead or arrested. I've never seen anything like it. It was a massacre in broad daylight in a capital city of roughly 20 million. Desensitization is a tool often used by many reporters to escape the trauma they face when standing on the front lines of unfolding events. They purposefully distance themselves when things get too difficult to handle. According to a 2019 study by Chloe Rochelle, 1 in 5 journalists met the threshold for PTSD, and 90% experienced PTSD-like symptoms after Hurricane Harvey. So, as journalists, they have trained their brains to become emotionally numb to people's stories and events. Feeling helpless and unable to act in stressful situations can build emotional barriers we use to distance ourselves from others, more so in Deep Parvaz's case. Because this isn't the bystander effect, when the only option you have is bearing witness by Deep Parvaz. The next day we went to a mosque where maybe 200 or so of these bodies were kept. There were these blocks of ice on top of them, and there were these family members going in and out of the mosque, just trying to identify their loved ones. It was intensely chaotic and emotional. So my colleague and I walk outside, and we start talking to this woman, and she says that her husband is among the dead, and she's shaking and in shock. And she's describing her last phone conversation with her husband when the shooting started. And she describes him as an engineer who was unarmed and who was the father of her 4 children. And my colleague is translating, and I'm not even looking up. I'm just in my notebook, furious, not wanting to miss a detail. And then he just stops translating while she's still talking, and I look up at him. And the look on my face is like, dude, what? Then he leans in and whispers, and now would be a good time for you to put an arm around her shoulder. And this makes my little reporter's brain totally short circuit because I am not a touchy-feely kind of person. But the look on his face was just clear. Get over yourself, be human now. And so I really kind of robotically almost put an arm around her shoulder, and the second my hand touches her, she just collapses into my chest and starts sobbing as she's holding on to me, and it hits me really hard that this woman doesn't care what kind of reporter I am or what my silly little rules are. She just wants me to register what is happening to her on the worst day of her life. She wants me to bear witness. Spring of 2011 was the start of the uprising in Syria, what is now the Civil War. And I was sitting in the newsroom at Al Jazeera's headquarters in Qatar, watching this sort of grainy YouTube footage of unarmed civilians being mowed down by the Syrian military. And at the same time, a government spokesperson was on our airwaves claiming that this isn't really what was happening. And we couldn't control any of this because they'd already shut down our bureau in Damascus. But I'm a multinational. I have an Iranian passport. So my boss, he agreed to deploy me to Syria, where I wouldn't need a visa to enter. But at this point, the Syrian authorities have already become super paranoid. So they strip searched me and found my American passport in the pocket of my jeans. This escalated things. So they led me to the parking garage under the airport and drove off into the night. We pulled into this compound where I assumed it was some sort of government building, where they pulled me out of the car by my hair. They sat me in front of this desk in this sort of dimly lit portable office, and there were all of these men yelling at me. Nothing I said was accepted by them, that I was a reporter, that I wasn't part of some conspiracy. They didn't even believe that I didn't speak Arabic, so I realized very quickly that truth had no currency over there. So they threw me in a cell, and I saw that it was absolutely covered in blood. Like so much that you didn't even know where to stand or lean. So I squatted in this corner and tried to wrap my head around the hell that I was in. And I stood against that wall and I thought to myself, they're gonna kill me. And worse than that though, believe it or not, worse than dying was the thought of dying like that. Dying alone. I knew that I was going to be an anonymous body. If I was lucky, they would throw me in a ditch. And I've never felt so alone in my entire life. I can hear people being tortured inside this compound, outside this compound, the voices. They all kind of echo. But then, there's this one voice that stands out. And I can't exactly figure out why, except that he sounded like a boy. And I can tell that there was more than one person hurting him. And he was just howling. He was swearing he didn't know things. He was swearing to God he hadn't done anything wrong. He was calling out to God. He was calling out to his mother. And I couldn't take it anymore. After a while, it was brutal. So I put my hands into my ears to just try and block it out. But the second I did that, I felt such shame. Because I realized that this kid was in his own far worse version of the wall. He was alone. He was dying alone. So I put my hands down just to do what I could, which is to hear him. All I had was the ability to bear witness just in that fashion. I mean, the kid was there choking on his own blood in his own country, and nobody was going to know. So I listened to him for a while, and every scream is excruciating. Then, after a while, his voice just A couple of days later, the Syrians decided that, maybe it wasn't a good idea for them to disappear an Iranian citizen. So they sent me to Iran for additional questioning. And much to my surprise, the Iranian authorities freed me and sent me back to my family. But I didn't want to not be working. So I flung myself back into my work. Every job, every assignment, didn't matter, I was doing it. But what I did in doing so was I also built a distance between me and the things I was reporting on, the people I was reporting on. But when that woman in Egypt fell into my chest and started sobbing, in that second that it took for her to fall into me, she destroyed that distance. And I was back at the wall, and the boy's voice was inside my head. As painful as it is, I realized that that was necessary for me to bear witness fully to what's happening to someone. Beyond a couple of paragraphs they might actually get in a story. And as much as some stories will leave a mark, sometimes that's just what it takes.
The next speech you'll all hear tonight is a persuasive speech. This is a presentation that seeks to identify and describe an ongoing problem. The speaker uses emotion, logic, credibility, in an attempt to urge the audience to act on a controversial issue.
So tonight, Grant Kellett will once again grace us with his wonderful presence to stage to do a persuasive speech. Let's welcome Grant back to the stage.
6 years ago, Larry Bostic was hit by a bus. His injuries were severe and called for several invasive reconstructive surgeries to his face, limbs, and sternum. Kern Valley Public Radio reported in 2019 that he was given a prescription for hydromorphone to help with the chronic and severe pain. The prescription eventually ran out, but the addictive properties of the drugs had him hooked. Initially, he found ways to get more pills, but could not afford them for long and had to switch to a cheaper option: heroin. It wasn't long before he hit rock bottom. Larry lost his job and custody of his son. Larry's story has become an increasingly common one. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services estimates 10.3 million Americans have used opioids in 2019, and 50,000 people are expected to die from overdoses this year. Our approach to managing this crisis is not working, and we can no longer stand idly by while drug use ravages this nation. Thus, I'm here to convince you that we must take a radical set of actions if we are to curb the tide of what has come to be known as the opioid epidemic. So today, we will explore our nation's drug problems, unearth its causes, before finally unpacking a comprehensive set of solutions. Let's begin by examining the problems. Substance abuse is on the rise, but treatments are insufficient. The Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration reported in 2018 that 30.5 million Americans tried an illicit substance in the past month. Of that number, the Center of Behavioral Health and Statistics reported 22.5 million needed drug rehab treatment at a specialty facility. This means they were in need of professional help, like counseling and access to addiction medications. A 2019 WebMD article, it describes butyroprophyl and methadone as being medications that suppress opioid receptors to help minimize withdrawal symptoms, while naloxone is used as an antidote that can stop an overdose from killing someone. Unfortunately, the number of individuals who receive help is incredibly low. The Center of Behavioral Health and Statistics went on to state that only 9% of people who needed help were able to get access to any sort of rehab or treatment. Some opponents may say that these individuals are responsible for their own actions and thus responsible for the consequences. But this line of thinking ignores evidence that neurological changes from drug use rewire the brain. A 2019 article by Patrice Sabero-Picaro, Luis Santillan, and Estela Castillo-Ortega explains that the drug-seeking actions that were initially voluntary responses become involuntary habits governed by the dorsal strata. In other words, drug use corrupts logical thought processes to the point where one's decisions are no longer their own. Substance abuse in the U.S. leads to several implications. First is the economy. A 2017 report from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health says that $193 billion per year is lost in workplace productivity, healthcare expenses, and crime-related costs due to substance abuse. Second is the human cost. The CDC reported in 2017, the most recent data set available, that there were 70,237 drug overdose deaths. This is a nearly 10% increase from 2016. We have seen that this problem will not go away on its own. So let's get to examining the underlying causes. The opioid epidemic is complex. A variety of past practices have compounded to bring us to the brink. To understand how we got here, we need to take a look at both our criminal classifications of drug use and our approach to treating addiction. First, criminalizing drug use is not effective when it comes to treating addiction. A 2016 report from the Human Rights Watch explains that criminalization does little to help those whose drug use has become problematic. It tends to drive those who use drugs underground, making it less likely that they will access care and more likely that they will engage in unsafe practices that leave them vulnerable to disease and overdose. A 2016 report from the National Drug Policy Alliance describes that the main reason people do not call 911 when they or their friend overdoses is because of fear of arrest. Instead of helping, our policies result in 1, prison overcrowding when we incarcerate individuals for minor possession, and 2, high rates of recidivism because people are not getting the treatment that they need when they are in jail. The peer-reviewed journal ASCP reported in 2019 that only 20% of people jailed for drug use get any sort of rehab or treatment. The second cause of the drug crisis is a lack of treatment facilities. Treatment facilities in the United States are too sparsely located, and many are not equipped with necessary resources to effectively treat addicts. According to a 2019 article by the American Addiction Center, there is not enough treatment facilities to help everyone. This problem is particularly bad in rural areas. The National Rural Health Association reported in 2017 that 92% of substance abuse treatment facilities in the US are located in urban areas. This means many addicts live in locations when they are unable to access services such as counseling and the necessary treatment medications. Even so, many of the treatment facilities that do exist do not even offer these vital medications. A January 2018 article in Vox pointed out that fewer than half of the treatment facilities offer any of these addiction medications. Now that we have a better understanding of America's substance abuse problem, we're ready to dive into some solutions to tackle the issue. Solving America's opioid epidemic will require a radical approach to drug policy and support. It's clear that our attempts to stop these with punitive measures have failed. The time has come to shift to a controversial solution that has already been proven effective in the nation of Portugal. The first step that we need to take is to decriminalize drug use in the United States. To be clear, this does not mean legalizing all drugs. It means the use or possession of drugs would no longer be considered a criminal offense and instead result in a civil infraction. This method has worked before. In 2001, Portugal was one of the first major countries to decriminalize all drugs. Since then, the amount of drug use has gone down every year, and rates of treatment seeking have gone up 60%. The most important piece of data can be found in a 2018 report released by the European Union. Overdose rates have gone down 80%. This means thousands of lives in Portugal have been saved by this policy. It is time for the United States to follow suit and end the criminalization that a 2016 report from the Drug Policy Alliance describes as a catastrophic failure. The second solution would implement massive upgrades to this country's network of treatment centers. The recently proposed CARE Act does just that. An article in Vox from 2018 explains that the CARE Act will put tens of billions of dollars over the next few years towards a slew of different initiatives. First, the Act gives funding to treatment centers to make sure they stock the crucial medications beyond norepinephrine, methadone, and naloxone. Next, the Act will give funding to treatment centers so that they can make more of them and so that people in rural areas have access to services. By giving rehab centers the proper amount of funding, they will be able to treat underlying mental health disorders and offer longer stays in rehab. These things, in combination with medication, will prove crucial to saving thousands of lives. Finally, decriminalizing drugs and passing the CARE Act will not happen without support from every single one of you. Making a phone call to your local representative isn't going to change their mind. We are far too divided. We must elect leaders of our community that will fight for the changes we so desperately need. But how do you know who to elect? I put together a handout. It will be available to you guys after speech night, and you can feel free to pick one up. It contains information on how to become a registered voter and how to identify where your local politicians stand on the issue of drug abuse and treatment. We have the power to solve for America's drug crisis. Today, we looked at the extent of America's drug problem, we examined some of the causes, and finally, we identified ambitious but realistic solutions. Larry Bostic has been clean for 19 months. The result? He finally has permission to see his son again. Larry's success gives us hope, but he was one of the lucky few that avoided incarceration and received proper treatment. Many others won't share Larry's outcome unless we take decisive action to decriminalize drug use and revamp our treatment centers. By the time speech night is over, approximately 8 Americans will die from drug overdose. Let's change the numbers.
We have come to our final event, the debate. In this formal style of debate, teams are randomly assigned to argue opposing sides of a controversial issue. The team who prepares the best arguments for their side is declared the winner. Audience participation is welcome. If you hear an argument that you like, feel free to knock on your armrests or say, hear, hear.
In this debate, you will hear from an affirmative speaker and a negative speaker. Tonight, our debaters are Alexis Gerardo and Gavin Gold. Alexis is double majoring in economics and law, and this is her 4th semester on the team. Fun fact, she's not like other girls, you know? She's a dedicated warlock who's leveled up to 97 after arduous adventuring. And for Gavin, he's also majoring in communication studies, and this is also his 4th semester on the team. A really cool fun fact about him, my personal favorite, is that he spends his free time oversleeping. So without further ado, please give it up for Alexis and Gavin. I call this house to order. As a reminder to the audience, debate is an interactive activity, so please knock, stomp, clap, and say hear, hear if you agree when a debater is making a good point. This will help keep things exciting while also making sure and letting the debaters know what arguments you like. So, is everybody ready? Yeah. All right. It's going to be a good, clean fight, right, guys? That's what I thought. All right. So I now recognize the affirmative speaker to deliver constructive speech not to exceed 5 minutes.
All right. So the resolution of today is the United States should replace private insurance with a Medicare for All program. My job as the affirmative today is to stand by the resolution. So I will start my time now. Observation 1 is the resolution analysis of this debate. Private health insurance, according to healthinsurance.org, refers to health insurance plans marketed by the private health insurance industry as opposed to government-run insurance programs. Medicare, according to Medicare.gov, Medicare is defined as federal health insurance programs for the elderly, disabled, and individuals with ESRD. Observation 2 is the background, the harms. How many individuals don't have health insurance? Well, according to PBS.org, about 44 million Americans in the United States have no health insurance, and about 38 million have inadequate health insurance. Significance is why is it bad if people don't have health insurance? Well, a report 2019 from US News explains that when people do not have health insurance, they avoid seeking treatment or they go into medical debt. This article says that in 2018, 41% of uninsured adults said they had delayed care, and 47% they said they had trouble paying their medical bills. Inherency. Our current healthcare system is dependent upon private insurance companies who have continued to increase premiums and prioritize profit over your health. The United States is the only developed country in the world without a single-payer healthcare system. Australia, Switzerland, Japan, and the UK have all proved this system is feasible, affordable, and far better than ours. It is time for a change, hence the plan. Observation 3 is the plan text. The United States government Congress will pass a Senate Bill 1129 Medicare for All Act of 2019. And the solvency of this debate is that our plan, which was proposed by U.S. Bernie Sanders, will be paid for with a payroll tax about 7.5%. And according to the Congressional Budget Analysis scoring in 2019, this will generate about $3.9 trillion over 10 years. And yes, while that number may sound high, it is actually less than employers will pay now in healthcare contributions, meaning the plan will actually save employers and people in this room money over time. Uniqueness is the bad stuff inherited by the status quo that we live in. Healthcare for many Americans is insufficient or non-existent in the status quo. PBS reports that 1/3 of Americans do not have sufficient healthcare, and this means individuals must forgo preventative care and cannot catch illnesses before they become serious or maybe even untreatable. And it also means that when someone must seek treatment, they must go into medical debt out of pocket. The link. As that plan passes, the internal link is how we fix the plan. The Americans are able to cover healthcare costs, and without the plan passing, the cost of medications and other treatments are way too high to afford. 2019 Consumer Reports an article explains that under our current system, 30% of Americans who take prescription medicine say their out-of-pocket cost for a drug they regularly take has increased over the past year, and of those, 12% say their drug costs went up by 100 or more depending on what that medication is. The impact of this is that access to healthcare would ultimately lead to improved health and financial stability. 1. Health, death, and disability by preventable diseases is rampant in the United States. A single-payer system is the only proven means to save and improve the quality of life of those without access to affordable medication. In comparison, the published peer-reviewed Journal of Health Affairs 2018 found that of the 18 most developed countries, the United States ranked at the bottom for a number of deaths that could have been saved and prevented by a timely and effective healthcare system. 2017 article CBS explains that insurance coverage can reduce the risk of death by 20%. People are dying or suffering from chronic illness that could have been prevented or greatly alleviated, and this is an issue that needs to change. Second, a Medicare for all system would stabilize the economic detriment of health emergencies. According to policy analysis by the Office of Disease Prevention and Health Promotion, June 2019 says affordable healthcare is key to economic stability and to health. If we fail to change our system, the cost will continue to rise, forcing people to incur large debts when they become ill. The Atlantic 2018 explains that healthcare is the #1 cause of personal bankruptcy and is responsible for more collections and debt accumulation than credit cards or student loans. And 2015 American Academy of Family Physicians argued that health emergencies were responsible for throwing thousands of Americans into poverty. They described this poverty as insidious and self-perpetuating for affects generations over time of families. Life expectancy, learning abilities, health behavior, and risks for developing diseases are affected by poverty, as are educational work and lifestyle opportunities. The rest of the world realized a long time ago that this was preventable, and now it is time for us to catch up. So in the world of the affirmative, we solve the quality of life and we make it affordable for the people in this room to actually get the checkups that they need to prevent long-term harms. I strongly urge the ballot for the vote in the affirmative because we improve quality of life on them.
The negative speaker now has 2 minutes of cross-examination time to ask questions of the affirmative team, beginning now.
All right, thank you very much, Alexis. I think you brought up a lot of great points. I have a couple questions for you. So in the solvency, you talk about how you're going to pay for it with a 7.5% payroll tax. Can you explain to me what that is exactly?
Payroll taxes are imposed on employers or employees and are usually calculated as a percentage of the salaries employers pay their staff. Our bill will impose a 7.5% tax increase on employers when they get ready to pay employees. However, this is offset by not having to pay health insurance contributions anymore.
All right, so just to be clear in that definition, you said employers or employees, am I correct?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so basically, if I get the gist of your plan, you're going to say if you pass this, there's no more private healthcare at all?
Yes, everyone will be on Medicare as the same model that is inside of the UK.
All right. Okay, let's go back to the past a little bit. In 2009, we passed Obamacare, or the Affordable Care Act. Why didn't Obamacare or the ACA fix the problems that you're claiming to solve?
Because it failed to include a single-payer option and left insurance companies with the power to raise the rates. Also, leading states refused the Medicare increases and courts struck down the single-payer mandate.
Okay, awesome. So right now on the SQUO, I really like the doctor that I'm going to. Are you going to mandate that I have to go to a government-issued doctor now?
No, you can keep seeing your doctor. Our plan is all about how healthcare is paid for, not the healthcare itself.
All right, and final question. So you say that, would it be correct that your stance is that the United States has one of the worst healthcare systems in the world?
That it's the worst?
Right.
No, it is the best, but it is unaffordable to the majority of the population, which is the underlying issue of this entire debate.
All right, thank you very much.
I now recognize the negative to deliver a constructive speech not to exceed 6 minutes.
All right, thank you very much. I think Alexis brought up a lot of good points. So I'm going to be bringing up one new argument, a disadvantage in favor of the negation, and then going through her case in order, so the top of the case and then the advantage. All right, is everybody ready? All right, let's get this started. 6 minutes starting now. All right, so my first disadvantage is talking about pharmaceutical research and development. Currently, right now in the United States, the U.S. pharmaceutical industry invests large amounts of their profits directly into treatments and technologies. My first evidence in support of this is according to a 2019 report from The Balance states that the pharmaceutical industry is the largest contributor to funding research, funding over 60% of all pharmaceutical like discoveries and breakthroughs. The government accounts for a third of it, and the remaining bit is done by individual contributions and donors, etc. So what this means is that the current discoveries for cures for cancer, for cures against the coronavirus in the status quo, for cures against other deadly diseases are all pushed specifically by the private companies in the status quo. So therefore, if we pass the plan and we in turn cut into the profits of those companies, we run the risk of not solving four dangerous diseases post-plan. What this means, so what if we get hit by another gigantic bug such as the Black Plague during the medieval ages, or the Spanish flu that wipes out so much of the population? If you decrease the amount of funding to the United States, this leads to a big problem. According to a 2017 article from Forbes.com, they state that in a 25-year span, the United States was responsible for 20 of the 27 leading medical discoveries. So what that means, then this is in comparison to Europe, Canada, and Japan, all places that you stated in your first argument that have a single-payer system. What this means is that the unique system that the United States have is what uniquely creates all of these medical advancements that you run the risk of not having in the world of the affirmative. So if we have medical stagnation that is caused as a result of passing the plan, we get less cures developed. This leads to a lot of really big impacts. So the first impact here is about antibiotics. So currently in the status quo, there are 23,000 Americans that die each year from antibiotic-resistant bacteria. These numbers are expected to increase by 10 million people per year by 2050. And keep in mind that is only an estimation by that year. There could be more people even sooner. So what this means is that if we will cut into the cost of those pharmaceutical industries, we run the risks of dying to these diseases a lot sooner than we would be able to find the cures otherwise. And secondly, this also affects vaccine research, such as into finding cures for the coronavirus and other pandemic diseases. And third, it cuts into our cost of finding the cures for pain management, which is the largest issue that affects most of the majority of Americans in the status quo. That we run the risk of not fixing. So, now that we've talked about the disadvantages to it, let's go to the on-case arguments. So first, I'd like to highlight a key statistic that was provided by Alexis in her first speech, which is that 38 million Americans have inadequate health insurance. So, and nowhere in any of her plan text does Alexis talk about how adoption of Medicare for All will lead to actual adequate health insurance post-plan. So all that we guarantee is that we have millions and millions more Americans that have health insurance, which is going to only slow up the hospitals and the doctors and overload their workload. So you go from waiting 1 hour at the doctor, maybe an hour and a half, to 4, 5, 6 hours at the doctor with the amount of people that are waiting for treatment.
Here, here.
So what this means is that all the preventative care that they claim to have all these benefits for don't happen. Because as you know, Americans have jobs. And if you have an appointment at 9 a.m. that runs until 4 o'clock, and you have work at 2, you now have to choose between going to work or getting health care. That should not be something that happens in the world of the United States, and is a reason not to prefer.
Here, here.
All right. And so they're probably going to talk about how that we shouldn't have people dying, people dying on the streets outweighs a potential longer wait time. But my argument here is that the longer wait time is actually going to cause the impacts that they're trying to prevent. If you have a awful disease that you are trying to get preventative care for, you don't know what is happening, you won't be able to find out if you have that for a much longer period of time. For say, if you call up your family doctor and say, I want to set up an appointment for next week, all of a sudden you don't get an appointment next week. You get it 3, 4 weeks out, 2, 3 months out because of the amount of people that are all trying to see the same doctor. This is all a problem that is going to happen in the world of the affirmative, guaranteed. Now, let's get on to their advantage. They talk about how most of the majority, basically about the cost of all the health insurance in the status quo. My first argument here is that this is an unfortunate, necessary evil. Because if you cross-apply this argument with my disadvantage, it's the money that comes from these pharmaceutical companies that helps us develop all of these cures and vaccines. All of these reasons are reasons why we are able to get all of these amazing developments in the United States in comparison to other countries. My second argument here is that with the addition of so many more people into the healthcare system, this is going to create a medical shortage for the amount of people that are trying to get their life-saving drugs such as insulin or medicine. If everybody is all of a sudden trying to get a hold of it, the pharmaceutical companies simply can't keep up, which in turn is only going to kill more people in the world of the affirmative.
The affirmative now has 2 minutes of cross-examination time to ask questions of the negative team. Beginning now.
Hi, Gavin. So your argument on pharmaceutical research is that these companies won't be able to have the cash to do research once we shift to this system, correct?
Yeah, so my main argument is that I think you lead a very dangerous slope here. If you try to cut into the cost of a potential pharmaceutical company, you run the risk of not developing that cure for cancer sooner, that cure for the coronavirus or other awful diseases. We need to have these cures developed as soon as possible, and the best way to have that...
Okay, thank you. So my next question is that you would argue that U.S. pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson are a good example of this, right?
Yeah, so as I said before, if you look to the amount of medical breakthroughs that Johnson & Johnson and other companies have created is a warrant as to why they are good and why the investments in it is good.
And my next final question for you is that they would not have been able to make these, you're making this argument, they wouldn't have been able to make these discoveries without private health care?
Again, to tie back into the first answer before you cut me off, I think it's important that we have as much money financed into it and we have the most money financed to these companies underneath the unique multi-payer plan in comparison to single payer.
No further questions.
Alrighty, I now recognize the affirmative to deliver a speech not to exceed 3 minutes.
Alright, for everyone of you out there flowing through your classes, the order of this is going to be on-case arguments, meaning my entire first speech and its refutations, and then it's going to be the negations case, which is referred to as the off-case. Everybody good to go?
Let's go.
Alright, so let's do this. Starting up my time. Now, first addressing the argument when he's making the argument on how this is going to increase wait times all over the United States of America in regards to healthcare. My argument for this is that simply, he says that it's inadequate, but my argument here for this is that proven in other countries that have this system, we have seen that they have overall better life increases. When you drop my argument saying that, in comparison, the peer review journal says that in 2018, out of the 18 most developed countries, the United States was ranked at the bottom for the number of deaths that could have been prevented by timely and effective care. That is the direct evidence that refutes Gavin's entire case, saying that it is going to become inadequate once we pass this plan. That being said, the entire argument falls flat. And not only that, but simply like saying the argument that it's going to increase wait times is not even inherently worse than succeeding the fact that the people in this room and people out in the rest of the United States of America are dying because they do not have access to health care. And you see that people are dying, and this gets worse over time, and the issue is never solved. And not only that, but people they're falling into bankruptcy because they want to save themselves from dying. This is entirely an issue that is not solved by litigation. Now, let's get to the argument when he's talking about how this is a necessary evil. This kind of rhetoric is entirely false. So now I'm going to disprove this argument. So in regards to this argument, this is not a necessary evil. People traveling across the United States of America's border to go to a different country to get cheaper medicine is not a necessary evil. That is entirely false. The fact that people in the United States that have diabetes have to spend like more than $200 for one little jar of insulin to live is ridiculous, honestly. And not only that, but other countries like Switzerland has the same drug companies that provide these same medications at a significantly cheaper price. And then that ties to the exact fact that less people are dying over there to this issue that America has. And then he has the argument talking about like coronavirus, but the thing is okay, so in Switzerland with this same medication at a more affordable rate, more people are able to save themselves from getting coronavirus. And not only this, but the affirmative has a way to solve for this entire issue and this entire argument, because in the world where the people in this room cannot afford to get they can't afford to get a checkup, they're going to ignore the entire fact that they possibly have coronavirus. But in the world of the affirmative, we give the ability to the people to check up if they have coronavirus or not, because the people in this room have probably been like, oh wow, I'm really sick, maybe I should go to the doctor. No, I can't afford that. That's the entire mindset that is inside of the status quo. The affirmative entirely solves for this issue. Now let's get to off-case arguments. He's just making the argument of that, you could cross-apply pretty much everything I just said, that Switzerland is also solving for these superbugs. They have the same medications. That is my time.
So, before we begin our last two rebuttal speeches, I've forgotten to add that Alexis and Gavin are actually debate partners in real life. So this explains why this whole thing is so neck to neck. So just give them one more applause before they even begin the rebuttal. So I now recognize the negative to deliver a rebuttal speech exceeding no more than 5 minutes.
All right, thank you very much, everybody. Seeing as this is going to be my last opportunity to speak, I'd first like to thank everybody for coming out, and I hope you're enjoying all the clash and the arguments being presented. And I'd like to thank Alexis for bringing up a lot of good points. All right, so the order, just real quick, is going to be Alexis's on-case arguments first, and then the disadvantage on the bottom, and then some reasons to vote for me. Okay. Is everybody ready? All right, let's get started. Starting now. All right, so the only major refutation that Alexis comes up here and claims on the top of case arguments is that, okay, that if more people have access to health care, that's better than nobody having it at all and them dying in the streets. However, as I stated in my previous speech, she fails to understand the nuance of the argument. And the nuance of the argument is that when you have a bunch of more people in the healthcare system, that means ultimately nobody gets the quality insurance that they the quality care that they deserve. When we're talking about preventative care and early onset care, when you need to discover problems early, that doesn't happen in the world of the affirmative. The reason being is that your wait times go up way up. You now go from waiting 1 hour at the doctor to waiting 4, 5, or 6 hours at the doctor. And that is something that a majority of Americans simply can't afford to do. At the point where we are scheduling doctor's appointments and then having to go to work, again, now we have to trade whether or not we go to our job or go to preventative care, which leads to people losing their jobs in the case of if they value their health over their own job, which only serves to worsen the effects of poverty that Alexis is claiming to try and solve for. It just simply doesn't happen in the world of the affirmative. Ultimately, we need to help these people with some other way alternatively to Medicare for all, simply because we can't afford to have everybody fighting over the same handful of doctors. So, let's go on to the advantage and a reason why you can vote for me here. So, basically the entire option here is basically, okay, yes, the United States has a lot of really expensive medication in the status quo. I'm not going to go and deny that. But what I'm going to state is that, again, that is the key reason why we developed so many key vaccines and key cures for a lot of these diseases. Again, look to my evidence that I provided, where the United States uniquely was the one that created all of these cures and these diseases. Not the single-payer systems in Japan, China, or not China, Australia, and like Europe. It's these reasons why basically all these other countries steal our medicine after we create it, because we are the ones that invented it in the first place. And in fact, if we don't no longer do this, this means that we run the risk of triggering the disadvantage at the same time that nobody is actually getting any sort of quality care in the world of the affirmative. So, thank you. Let's go to the disadvantage. So, on the disadvantage, the only refutation here is basically that it doesn't need to be as expensive as it does. But again, as I stated in cross-sex and in my first speech, I think it's very dangerous to run the risk of a potential superbug or a potential gigantic disease hitting the United States and us not being prepared for it. If we get hit by a huge black plague or something other than that, and we don't have the amount of money invested to potentially find a cure for this, we only run the risk of killing many millions more of Americans than the ones that are currently affected in the status quo. We need to help these people, but we need to help them in a different way. The negation firmly asserts that the way that we need to do this is not through Medicare for all, simply because all it does is drag the quality of care down for everybody. All this means is that everybody gets hurt instead of just the people right now in the squo. It's a difficult problem to solve, but this is not the way to do it. So, in conclusion, let's go over, again, the key reasons why negation should be winning this debate. One, they don't solve for the increase in wait times. Ultimately, Alexis doesn't provide an adequate response as to why increased wait times will not happen, or as to why increased wait times are good. All this means is that you run the risk of people not getting the preventative care that they need because they're waiting months out for an appointment, and then even when they get that appointment, they're waiting at the doctor for hours on end. All that this means is that if early detection is so important, there are weeks and weeks upon which they will never detect this at all because they are sitting at home waiting for their turn to go into the doctor. Ultimately, at the same time, you run the risk of decreasing investment into these cures, which will only serve to hurt everybody involved. For all of these reasons, I think that you should vote strongly in favor of the negation today. Thank you.
All right, great speech. I now recognize the affirmative to deliver a rebuttal speech not to exceed 3 minutes.
All right, last speech of the day, folks. You guys ready? Yeah! All right, so let's do this. So for everyone who is still flowing, the order of this is going to be, let's go affirmative, which is on case, and then off case. And then it'll just be a summary of the main arguments that are happening in this debate and why you will be voting for the affirmative. I am going to start my time now. So beginning with the argument, he's still saying that I didn't dispute his claim of how the quality is going to decrease. I did though. And the proof of this is that when I said that the other countries that have this system, less people are dying in there. He dropped my entire statistic when I repeated in 2018. They found out that 18 of the most developed countries, the United States ranked at the bottom for the number of deaths that could have been prevented by timely, effective care. This proves to you that in other countries, less people are dying because they have this system that we do not have. That disproves his entire claim. And not only this, then again, he tries to make the argument that he's still saying it's a necessary evil. But he entirely didn't even refute my case about diabetes. When people have to cross the border to get affordable insulin, people are literally dying because they can't afford over $200 for one little bottle of insulin. With that being said, my other argument that I brought up that he didn't even really dispute is that drug companies inside of Switzerland are making these exact very same medications that the United States of America does, but the difference is that people can actually afford it in that country, which explains the reason as to why less people are dying there. There's really no reason not to pass this plan. And not only this, he tries to make the argument that the United States is the best and we're able to produce all of these vaccines. And yes, we are, but the thing is that when something becomes mass-produced, it's like one of the laws of economics that once it is mass-produced, it should be usually more accessible and more affordable, and the price should go down. Once the supply increases, the price goes down, making it more affordable for people to get. And if anything, this solves entirely back because once more people can afford it, those companies get more money to keep increasing innovation. There's still no reason to not pass the plan to be permanent. And then he again talks about the superbug and coronavirus and how we're all going to die from it. And my thing for this is in the world of the negation, right? Let's say we get this superbug virus or whatever in 2050. It's a long time from now. 2050, he said. The affirmative wins on time frame because when you see the fact that people are dying in the status quo due to lack of insurance, then as time goes by the time of 2050, a lot of people will have been dead from not being able to afford the healthcare that they need. And not only this, but in the world of the affirmative, people have time to check on themselves, by going to a simple checkup, and then they can find out if they have the effects of this superbug virus. In the world of the negation, the people in this room are never going to be able to go to the doctor's office and get that simple checkup. They're simply just going to die from having the virus. I strongly urge that you vote for the affirmative because I have clearly explained to you that there is no reason as to why we should not pass the affirmative plan. People are dying in the status quo. The number one reason of bankruptcy in the United States is the inability to pay medical expenses. If other countries can do it, so can we. We need to change. When you see the fact that people are dying, there is no reason as to why we should be thinking about a minimal little weight increase versus as compared to millions of people dying in the United States of America.
Take a big round of applause for Gavin and Alexis Mahone. All right, folks. Well, debates are fun, but they do have winners, they do have losers, and we need to do a little applause meter to determine who you think that is. So, if at the end of this round you think the negation has proved that we ought not to adopt this plan, let me hear you now. All right, and if at the end of this debate you feel the affirmative has made their case and we should pass this plan, well, that's too close to you, Paul. Have a great